Welcome here into Teal The Show. It is almost time for the regular season to start. Got Alessandra Pontbriand hanging out with me tonight. Alessandra, the training camp is officially done. The cuts have been made. We now know the Jaguars roster. It's been a little bit of an interesting week with all the cuts. Definitely not an exciting week for a lot of the guys, but we're getting closer.
I know. On Friday, the Jaguars announced that they finally brought in John Reese Plumlee. I remember him from his Ole Miss days. Now I feel kind of old because he's been in the league. And I remember when he was playing for Lane Kiffin.
Just wait until you cover some of the guys in high school and then they're in the league. Ladd McConkey shot him when he was up at North Murray High School, just got drafted. So been there, done that a little bit. So the Jaguars made some tough cuts. Not too many, I think, surprise cuts along the way in this one. We did Monday's episode. We had a pretty good idea who would be on the 53-man roster, but it wasn't finalized just yet. So now, as we've seen the fallout, Christian Braswell, Tyler Shatley, maybe they're two, I'd say, the biggest upset cuts of them all, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, Doug Peterson, even the coordinator, said it during training camp that this is going to be a hard roster to cut down. They have a lot of depth, but no one that was cut except for the two guys that you talked about were that surprising. I think that there were a lot of people like Elijah Cooks fighting with Tim Jones for a wide receiver spot, but, you know, you kind of knew at the end of the preseason that Tim Jones was going to be the guy. So it's not too surprising, but you know what, now we hopefully have a, you know, playoff contending roster to look at.
That's definitely their hope. So the Jaguars roster, for the most part, was actually pretty set. I sat down and did my way too early 53, got 49 of them right. So I'd say you have a pretty good idea. It's always those last couple that are tough to figure out, and that's where this year's roster is the same way. There's a couple of surprises. I think the biggest surprise is Asezi Otonwu. He's a guy who spent last year on the Jaguars practice squad. Now he's on the 53-man roster. Doug Peterson mentioned earlier this week that he saw the growth from Asezi starting last year during those practice squad practices, and that it's really that competition, and that's where he knew that he was going to be a guy who was ready to contend. And it worked out for him. And now all of a sudden he's a guy who showed up during those preseason games out on the field, racking up a couple of sacks along the way, and now he's on the 53-man roster.
And those are the guys that you want to see. Those are the guys that you're rooting for because you know that obviously they want to make the 53-man roster. There's quite a few guys that know, like Trevor Lawrence, you know he's going to make the roster. Foye Lukin, you know he's going to make the roster. You know, but there's a few guys like Asezi who don't really know, and they worked so hard during training camp. We got to see that in training camp and in preseason, and now they're finally getting, you know, their payoff by making 53. So
you mentioned Trevor Lawrence, and I think for the most part this show we're going to talk about the Jaguars season as a whole before we turn the page to week 1 next week. But this Jaguars team is tied to Trevor. They just paid him, and as it's been the same story since he got here, the Jaguars are going to go as far as Trevor can take them. Jaguars offensive coordinator Press Taylor talking this week said that he's seen growth from Trevor since he stepped here into the job here in Jacksonville, but he doesn't think that Trevor's done growing just yet.
I think so. I think he was on track for that last year. I think the first half of the season he was playing as good as anybody. I don't know if he was getting credit for that. Outside the building, I have no clue. But we were very happy with how he was playing, how he was running the offense, managing games, winning games for us. So, yeah, I think Trevor just continues to grow every single year within the offense, just within playing quarterback, leading this team, being the face of the franchise. It's been super impressive since the day I got here, just working with him and to see him grow and step into, I mean, what I think you would feel is naturally ahead for him has been really cool to see. And I think he's just going to continue to get better every single day.
That's exactly what you want to hear from Press, though. We've seen some good things from Trevor, but we're still waiting to see, I think, that full season where the light's on and he just goes off and leads the offense to great things.
Yeah, in the beginning of last season, you know, around this time, we saw that. We saw him taking what we thought was going to be the step forward, and then at the end of the season, he took a few steps back. He didn't throw as many touchdowns, and he threw more interceptions, almost double the amount of interceptions from 2022 to 2023. So there's a lot of growth, hopefully, for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, listen, he's really young. I think he's like 24 years old. This is his 4th year in the league. But when you're comparing him to some of the other top quarterbacks who have been in the league for, I mean, over a decade. I think Aaron Rodgers is like almost 2 decades, probably the same amount of years that I've been alive. But when you're looking at that, there's still quite a few steps that Trevor needs to make. And, you know, they're confident that with the money that he just got, that he will take that next step this year. I think it's pretty, you know, it's not, you know, a secret that with the amount of money that they're paying him, they think that he can take them all the way to the playoffs. And I don't think the Super Bowl this year, let's be realistic, but at least get into the playoffs.
Hey, never say never. Never say never. But one thing we do have to do is at some point, we're past the young label for Trevor Lawrence.
I think this is it. This is the year where, you can't say that he's young anymore. Even though he's young, but you can't say he's young anymore. This is his 4th year in the league. You got to make that next step, and it really needs to be in this year. If he was a college football coach, he wouldn't have even lasted 4 years. Let's be honest here. Always got to bring it back to college.
Always got to bring it back to that. All right, we've still got plenty more Teal the Show. Coming up next, we'll talk a little bit more about what's next for the Jaguars season as a whole. That's coming up straight ahead after this quick break. All right, welcome back here into Teal the Show. So this is our last show before the Jaguars get into those game week preparations. So next week we're going to dive heavily into the Miami Dolphins and what the Jaguars are doing to get ready to try and head down to South Beach and maybe roll out with a win. But before we get to that point, let's talk about the Jaguars season as a whole. So there are high expectations for this team going into this year, but it's definitely going to be a tough road going through the AFC South. The Texans won it last year. The Jaguars are trying to get back onto the throne there, but the Titans have gotten better, and so have the Colts. So this is going to be a tough path. Jaguars are going to have to win a couple of games if they're going to pull this thing off.
Yeah, listen, if we know anything from last season, I cannot bet on a game to save my life. Like, I'm not good at picking, what the season record's going to be. It's just too much pressure for me. You're really good at it, though. I think you were you were perfect last season.
I was pretty close.
Pretty close. I was not. I think I was like 4 and whatever I think I got 4 games right, which is embarrassing.
No, well, you picked too many upsets.
That's
just
true,
go with what they're telling you. Just go with what they're telling you. So we'll see. She'll do better this year.
I better do better than 4 wins. I better.
Well, so we'll see how it all rolls out. But the Jaguars do have a tough road. And that Week 1 game is definitely no joke. There are a couple of other tough matchups along the way. And going through the AFC South is going to be a gauntlet. But the Jaguars do feel like they have a team that's prepared to try and make that run. But it all starts with that first step. And they're going to try and take it 1 week at a time as they move through it. But over the course of the season, you're going to need a few guys to step up. On the offense, we talked about Trevor Lawrence in the first half of the show. But somebody else outside of Trevor Lawrence always has to step up. If you had to pick one guy besides Trevor who would have a big season that leads to the Jaguars doing well, who would it be?
I'm going with the offensive line, but I think maybe center. I talked about this with Michelle, our meteorologist, yesterday. I think, and I'm going to say it, okay, you may not like it, but I think last season, especially at the end of the season, Trevor Lawrence was not completely comfortable. It didn't look like it. He was trying to do too much. It really did seem like, yes, he'll say that he, believes in his offensive line, but when you look at it, he just seemed like he wasn't that comfortable. Sure. So that's why I think the offensive line and offense needs to have a much bigger step than Trevor Lawrence needs to have this season. When you're looking at the wide receivers, you're looking at the tight ends, you're looking at the running backs, they're good. They have the skill players, but now you need the core players who start with the ball when they snap the ball to actually make that next step and do better.
Yeah, look, if there's one spot on this team that you're worried about, it should be the offensive line room because it's kind of been the same thing, and you can see some of those things with Trevor's play. If I had to pick one guy as a whole, I'd go with Travis Etienne. Overall, look, Travis has had a solid season last year, and he's been really good in taking steps forward, but the running game was inconsistent last year. The Jaguars could use a consistent rushing attack. That would do nothing but help Trevor, help those guys like Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis open up. Travis Etienne needs to get the ball. He needs to get the ball well, but in order to do that, back to your point, Alessandra, you got to have the offensive line running or working so that way they're opening up some space so Travis and maybe even Tank can get to rolling for this offense. All right, let's flip the script and go to the defense. So Ryan Nielsen is leading the defense. This is going to be his first time through. We really don't have the full picture of what a Ryan Nielsen defense is going to look like. We do know that he says he's going to play Eric Armstead all over the defensive line, but outside of that, we don't have a full vision on what the defense is going to look like. But if you had to pick one guy who really stands out and can be the crutch help to lead the Jaguars forward, who would it be?
I'm going it all the way in the secondary. They didn't have a good season at the end of last season. They're ranked as one of the worst, I think 24, 26 areas where they're ranked. I'm going to say Tyson Campbell.
Okay.
He's good. He's really good.
Yeah.
But I think he needs to be more of, he's a leader obviously back there. I'm not saying he's not, but I think that he needs to take, just like Trevor, a next step. He's paid this offseason to be able to do that. And I think he can really teach the other guys maybe not teach the other guys, but he can command the backfield a little, in my opinion, more, and hopefully that can negate all of the, explosive plays that we saw.
Having a cornerback that can lock down half the field is definitely always a pro.
Full field. Just lock down it all.
just lock down everything. Lock down the whole bank. The guy I'd go with would be Devon Hamilton. So Devon is a guy who had some injury issues just a year ago, but those injuries kind of are now gone. He's back to the form that we saw him in prior to that. So missing Devon Hamilton on that defensive line definitely held the Jaguars back a year ago because he is such a strong presence in stopping the run game and even pushing the pocket to make sure that guys like Josh Hines, Allen, and Trayvon Walker don't have a quarterback that can step up, that he's going right into that pressure. I'm going to go with Devon Hamilton because he does so many things. It doesn't show up on the stat sheet. You're not going to see a lot of people at the bank in those Hamilton jerseys because he's not that kind of guy, but he does the dirty work that gets other guys to be able to make those splash plays. I guarantee you Josh Hines, Allen, Trayvon Walker are going to be excited if Devon Hamilton is back at full strength and has a big season for the Jaguars this year.
Can I let the record show that he was in my head? But I was like, no, let's not go with him. Let's go back. I just want to say, let the record show, I was thinking Hamilton as well. And also, I just really hope that he has a good season. He is one of the sweetest people. Like, so nice. So I'm rooting for him, and I really do hope he has that, a good season this year.
All right, so one more last thing before we wrap up the show. So next week, we'll start talking about the Dolphins as a whole. That's going to be a very tough game.
Yeah.
But when you look at that Dolphins team, I think you start talking about the Tuas, you start talking about the Tyreek Hills, you start talking about their offense all around, and there's a lot of speed. The Jaguars are going to have to find a way to combat that. One defensive guy who's going to be key. Ooh. Besides Tyson, you can't use the same guy you just used. Who's the key for that first one? Because there's no one person that can stop it. But I think I have a good idea of the answer I'm going to go with.
I mean, when you're looking at Tua, you're looking at Tyreek Hill, you're looking at Jalen Waddle, Noah Beckham Jr., so good thing for the Jaguars.
Right.
But listen, those guys can run. They're really fast. They like to run downfield, so you have to go the secondary, in my opinion. But let's go maybe linebacker. I don't know who, but one of the inside linebackers, because Trayvon and Josh are an easy bet, but maybe one of the linebackers can help disrupt them. I don't know. That's a hard one.
I'll go Trayvon. I think Trayvon's going to be your key in week one. You got to get to Tua.
Yeah.
And you got to stop the run because if Devon A-Chain gets any space, the guy's fast. Yeah. We'll talk more about that Dolphins offense next week. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, Alessandra. Thank you at home for tuning in. Good night, everybody, and go Jags.